Welcome to the deep dive. If you've been following politics, especially in Florida, you know the Republican Party there, the RPOF, has had, well, just incredible success lately. Historic wins, a supermajority. It looks like total dominance.
It does on the surface,
Yeah.
but the sources we've looked at paint a really different picture underneath.
Yeah, it seems like beneath that unified front, there's this really fierce battle going on, and it's not Republicans versus Democrats.
No, not at all. It's happening entirely within the party. Basically, a kind of internal civil war for the direction, the soul of the Florida GOP.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What's our mission with this deep dive?
We're analyzing the source material,
Mhm.
and it really details what looks like a systematic effort by the RPOF establishment, the leadership,
Mhm.
to consolidate their power.
How are they doing that?
Well, the reports describe them actively marginalizing independent activists, grassroots groups. Basically, anyone pushing for candidates who aren't, blessed by the establishment.
But so pushing back against candidates seen as more, what, constitutionalist or grassroots?
Exactly. Candidates who might challenge the party line. The sources suggest the leadership is targeting its own base here.
And there's a specific term that keeps popping up in these sources, driving this whole fight, right? RINO.
That's the one. RINO. It stands for Republican in name only. And you really have to understand, this isn't just like a casual insult being thrown around.
No, it seems much deeper.
It's the core accusation from the activists. They use RINO to label Republicans they feel aren't sufficiently populist or America first. It signals this profound sense of betrayal.
A feeling that the leadership isn't really representing the base.
Precisely. The belief among these activists is that the leadership is more loyal to, say, consultants, lobbyists, big money, than to the actual Republican voters in Florida.
And it's interesting how the sources show these activists quickly connect RINO to another idea, the uniparty.
Right. It's not just that they see these establishment figures as maybe weak Republicans.
They see them as part of something bigger.
Yeah, they view the current RPOF leadership, according to these sources, as part of a kind of bipartisan establishment machine that works against core conservative principles, no matter which party holds the official title. It's a fundamental split over who the party actually serves.
You can really feel the intensity of this frustration in the descriptions of a meeting back in July in Venice.
That's right, late July. Around 200 right-wing activists gathered. And what's striking is, this is after big Republican wins in the state.
But they weren't celebrating.
Not according to the reports. The mood was apparently one of deep frustration with what they called an entrenched and corrupt elite right there in Florida. Less a victory lap, more like planning a revolt against their own party leadership.
And the complaints were specific. I remember reading about groups like the Pinellas Watchdogs.
Yes, they were asking, and I'm paraphrasing from the source here, but essentially, how is it possible we have the most popular Republican president ever, but our party is filled with rhinos?
And they weren't just talking about D.C.
No, they made it clear. We have them in our own backyard right here in Florida. It felt very local, very personal, even while connecting to national themes. So what are these groups actually trying to do? Like defend Florida, which was mentioned as an organizer of that Venice meeting.
Well, their focus, as described, is almost entirely internal. Developing strategies to identify and, frankly, oust establishment Republicans from local government positions, party leadership roles.
Like a purge, basically.
That's the language used by critics and observers, yes. They see it as needing to cleanse the party system. And the sources also note these groups aren't hiding their connections. They openly link up with figures like Michael Flynn, Roger Stone.
Which signals that alignment with the national populist wing challenging the traditional GOP structure.
Definitely. Now, once this grassroots energy started organizing and taking concrete action, well, the official RPOF leadership didn't just sit back.
How did they react?
The sources point to the RPOF executive director, Bill Helmick. He apparently sent out warnings to local party leaders.
Warnings about what? Specifically telling him to distance themselves from Defend Florida. He reportedly called the group, and this is a quote from the material, a matter of growing concern that directly impacts the unity and integrity of our organization.
So the establishment clearly saw this grassroots push not as, healthy debate, but as a direct threat.
It certainly seems that way. A threat to their control, to party unity as they define it.
And there's another layer here too, right? about funding.
Yeah, what's quite interesting is that while these activist groups emphasize being local and grassroots, that Venice meeting reportedly attracted some pretty influential, well-funded external players.
Like national conservative organizations.
Exactly. Right-wing charities and organizations promoting concepts like biblical citizenship. It shows this internal Florida fight isn't just happening in isolation. It's drawing significant outside money and institutional backing.
Which raises the stakes for everyone involved.
Absolutely. It's not just local committees arguing anymore.
Okay, so the RPOF leadership issues warnings. But the sources suggest they didn't stop there. It moved beyond just telling people to stay away from certain groups.
That's right. This is where the analysis in the source material really starts detailing the actions taken. We move from warnings to what's described as a pattern of actual expulsions and suspensions.
Targeting local leaders.
Specifically targeting local leaders who were seen as siding with that constitutional grassroots wing or challenging the establishment line. This is where the RPOF allegedly starts using its central authority quite forcefully.
Let's get into the specifics because some of these examples are pretty stark. Manatee County.
Yes, in Manatee County, the sources report the entire local Republican Executive Committee, the REC, was suspended.
The whole leadership team.
The whole team. And this included people like Trent Wayman and Jackie Heiss, the state committeeman and committeewoman. And the crucial point here is they were elected to those positions by local Republican voters.
So they won their elections, but the state party leadership just removed them.
That's the claim. And you can see why that action would fuel the grassroots perception that the establishment cares more about enforcing loyalty than respecting the local Democratic mandate.
It sounds like a message being sent.
A very public one, according to observers cited in the sources. A warning shot.
Then there's the case in Charlotte County. Dr. David Callen.
Right, Dr. Callen was chairman of the Charlotte County REC. He was removed. And what's particularly relevant, as the sources highlight, is that he had previously run against the current RPOF chairman, Evan Power, for that top state job.
An old political rival.
Exactly. And there's a claim mentioned in the reporting that Dr. Callen actually tried to resign first.
That they didn't let him.
The RPOF leadership allegedly rejected his resignation. And the reason given by critics. Rejecting it, instead of accepting it, triggered a party rule that barred him from any party participation for 2 whole years.
Wow. So it wasn't just about removing him, it was about sidelining him completely.
That's certainly how critics frame it. Less about enforcing rules, perhaps, and more like political payback designed to silence a potential challenger and discourage others.
And Brevard County fits this pattern too.
Similar situation described there. Rick Lacey, the longtime Brevard GOP chair, had just won re-election. But he was removed after an investigation cited, I think it was 15 rule violations. Things related to campaign finance, internal conduct.
Okay, so there were official charges.
There were. But when you look at the sequence, Manatee, Charlotte, Brevard, the sources describe it collectively as a disturbing pattern of purging grassroots, MAGA-aligned Republicans.
The argument being it's political retaliation disguised as rule enforcement.
That's the core accusation, an abuse of authority, as some sources put it, aimed at silencing leaders who dare to challenge the central RPOF leadership.
So if you synthesize all that, the picture emerging is one of systematically removing influential local figures.
Often using technical rule violations as the justification.
But consistently targeting those who aren't falling in line with the state party leadership.
Right. And the goal, according to the activists cited, is to replace them with leaders who will follow the RPOF's directives, potentially over the wishes of their own local members.
Which brings us right to the claims about money and influence that seem to be swirling around the RPOF establishment.
Exactly. Because the activists being purged, their argument is that they're being targeted because their loyalty is to the Constitution and the grassroots.
While the establishment's loyalty
is primarily to lobbyists, political action committees, maybe corporate dark money, according to these claims.
And the sources name names at the top.
They do. They point specifically to a network involving the RPOF chairman, Evan Powers, the executive director, Bill Helmick, we mentioned earlier, and a very prominent Florida lobbyist named David Ramba.
Okay, and what's the connection that's raising red flags for critics?
Well, the central claim, the one that really anchors the conflict of interest argument in the sources, is this. Evan Powers, the chairman of the Republican Party of Florida.
The guy helping decide which candidates get party support.
Yes. He is directly employed by Ramba Consulting, David Ramba's lobbying firm.
Okay, let's just pause there. The head of the state party works for a major lobbyist.
That's the connection highlighted in the source material. You can immediately see the perceived conflict, right?
Absolutely.
As RPOF chair, Powers has influence over party resources, endorsements, support for candidates running for state office.
Right.
Those officials, if elected, then vote on laws and regulations, laws that directly impact the clients David Ramba represents.
Clients in big sectors like utilities, transportation.
Critical, highly regulated sectors, yes.
Mm.
So the sources really frame this as blurring the lines between private lobbying interests and public party governance. It raises serious questions for voters about who's really setting the agenda.
Is it the party members or is it the corporate interests who employ the party chairman? That's the question being asked.
That's the core of it. And the sources suggest this dynamic really undermines trust.
And the connections reportedly don't stop with Powers. What about Helmick, the executive director?
There are claims detailed about him, too. The sources mention reports that Helmick used a vote-by-mail address associated with a property owned by David Ramba.
Okay.
And furthermore, the reporting suggests that Helmick's official homestead, his main residence, is actually in a different county. But he was apparently voting and even serving as a committeeman in the county where the Ramba-linked property is located.
So what are the critics implying there?
The implication drawn is pretty clear. You have the RPOF leadership enforcing rules very strictly against grassroots folks, purging them for sometimes minor technical violations.
Right, like we just discussed.
While the top leadership's own practices regarding things like residency and voting eligibility seem, at least to these critics, to be operating under a different, perhaps more flexible standard. Sort of a rules for thee but not for me situation.
Yeah, I can see how that perception would fuel distrust.
And the key takeaway here, stressed in the sources, isn't necessarily about whether these actions by Powers or Helmick are strictly illegal. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't.
It's more about the optics.
It's about the optics and the impact on trust. When your top party officials, powerful lobbyists, and major consultants operate in such interconnected ways, it just erodes public confidence.
It feeds that grassroots narrative we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It powerfully reinforces their claim that the establishment is ultimately beholden to insider deals and special interests, and that they're willing to silence the base to protect that system.
Okay, so we've laid out this internal war, the RPOF establishment versus the constitutional grassroots wing, involving purges and questions of influence. But you mentioned earlier that this isn't just an internal spat.
No, the effort to consolidate power, as described in the sources, extends outward. It becomes legislative. It starts affecting the democratic process for all citizens in Florida, not just party members.
How so?
This is the second prong of the strategy outlined. The Republican leadership, using its supermajority in the legislature, has reportedly moved to solidify its control by making it harder for citizens to bypass them.
And they're targeting the ballot initiative process.
Directly. That's the key mechanism here. The ballot initiative process is that sort of safety valve in Florida's Constitution. It lets citizens propose and pass constitutional amendments directly without needing the legislature's permission at all.
And this push to restrict it comes right after citizens have had success, or are trying to have success, with some pretty high-profile initiatives.
Precisely. Think about the recent efforts around issues like abortion access and recreational marijuana. These were citizen-led petition drives, gaining traction or even getting on the ballot for 2024.
So the establishment, feeling maybe bypassed or challenged by popular opinion on these issues?
He is now moving, according to critics cited in the sources, to make that direct democracy route much, much harder, basically closing the door that citizens use to get around them.
What specific changes are they making? What hurdles are being put up?
The sources detail several measures, things like banning anyone who isn't a Florida resident from collecting petition signatures.
Okay, that limits who can help gather signatures.
Right. Then there are proposals to impose felony penalties for even minor technical errors made during petition gathering.
Felonies for clerical errors.
That's the proposal. Critics argue it's designed to scare off volunteers and make the risk incredibly high. And they've also talked about shortening the time window allowed for organizers to collect and submit all the signed petitions.
So less time, fewer people allowed to help, and higher penalties for mistakes.
Taken together, yeah. Critics cited and sources say these measures are explicitly designed to choke off future citizen initiatives. They make the process exponentially more expensive and logistically challenging.
For who?
For anyone who isn't already incredibly well-funded, it makes it almost impossible for genuine grassroots groups, citizen movements, to actually succeed in getting their issues onto the ballot for a statewide vote.
So the effect is to keep power concentrated.
That's the argument. It concentrates power back into the hands of the state legislature, the very body the ballot initiative was designed to let citizens bypass when necessary.
It really does look like a comprehensive strategy then. Control the party internally through purges.
And control the broader democratic process externally through legislative changes.
Yeah, the two parts really seem to work together.
They reinforced each other. If you purge the internal activists, you remove people who might organize or fund these initiatives. And then, if any activists remain, you change the rules so they can't effectively use the main tool they have, left direct democracy, to challenge the government.
So, wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for someone listening? What does this all mean?
Well, I think the main narrative coming out of the source material is this clear picture of power consolidation within the Florida GOP.
Yeah.
And it's happening on two fronts simultaneously.
First, the internal actions, marginalizing, suspending, purging the activist, grassroots, constitutionalist wings of the party.
Right. Silencing dissent within the ranks. And second, these external legislative moves designed to significantly restrict direct citizen power through the ballot initiative process.
It seems the RPOF establishment, based on these reports, is drawing a very distinct line.
A line in the sand, absolutely. And the sources suggest the cost of crossing that line is severe, potentially expulsion from the party, and maybe even finding yourself shut out of the democratic process itself.
It really positions Florida as a kind of case study, doesn't it? Maybe a warning?
The sources definitely frame it that way, a potential cautionary tale for the Republican Party nationally about the risks of overly centralized power and blurred lines between party leadership and lobbying interests.
When the executives, the consultants, the lobbyists are all seen as working so closely together.
And when the party is perceived as purging its own base, potentially to protect those relationships, well, it seriously damages the credibility of the party's governance.
It leaves you with a pretty challenging question.
It really does. And it's something for you, the listener, to think about. If challenging the leadership within a major party becomes this difficult, this costly, this punitive, what happens then? Do grassroots voters eventually just give up on the party structure altogether? And if they do, what kind of, national political earthquake could that kind of internal collapse trigger?